the angels that fell from heaven to rule the world. Before the creation of humanity, the heavens were filled with the splendor of God's angelic host. These celestial beings were powerful, radiant, and deeply loyal to their Creator. But among them was one angel known as Lucifer, the morning star, who was exceptional in beauty and wisdom. Yet pride took root in his heart. He said in his heart, "I will ascend above the heavens. I will make myself like the Most High." Of the angels joined him in defiance, seeking to overthrow God's throne. But the rebellion was doomed from the start. The Bible tells us in Revelation 12:7-9, that there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against Lucifer and his followers. The rebellious angels were cast out. No longer allowed to dwell in the presence of God, their new domain became the earth, where their influence would change the course of human history forever. The Watchers and the corruption of humanity. The story of the fallen angels continues in the apocryphal text of the Book of Enoch, which expands. Assigned to oversee and guide human beings, however, they too fell into rebellion. The Watchers, led by a chief angel named Shemihaza, descended to Mount Hermon, where they made a pact to act against God's will. What was their plan? They desired human women, and they chose to abandon their heavenly status to fulfill their lust. Genesis chapter 6 verse 2 briefly references this event. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and they took wives for themselves. These unions between the fallen angels and human women produced offspring called the Nephilim, giants described as mighty, renowned warriors. But these were not heroes in the noble sense. The Nephilim were destructive and corrupt, spreading chaos across the earth as the fallen angels taught humanity forbidden knowledge, alchemy, weapon-making, sorcery, astrology, and other secrets. They led people further from God. Imagine just for a moment a world under the rule of the fallen, a world dominated by beings of immense power and size. The Nephilim ruled as tyrants, spreading violence, oppression, and immorality. Meanwhile, the fallen angels influenced human civilizations, leading them into idolatry and practices that violated God's laws. Pagan myths from various cultures, stories of gods coming down to mate with mortals or mighty demigods, support this biblical narrative, pointing to the pervasive influence of the fallen angel. Across the ancient world, the Bible describes this era as a time when the earth was corrupt in the sight of God, and the earth was filled with violence. Genesis chapter 6 verse 1. Humanity, seduced by the fallen angel's gifts and power, spiraled into depravity. God's creation, which he had declared very good, had become a shadow of its intended beauty. The judgment of the flood. But God is not indifferent to the plight of his creation. Seeing the corruption and violence that had overtaken the earth, he resolved to cleanse it. He chose one man, Noah, to build an ark and preserve a remnant of life. Through the great flood, God wiped away the Nephilim and their dominion, breaking the immediate grip of the fallen angels over humanity. The fallen angels, however, faced their own judgment. The Book of Enoch recounts how God imprisoned many of these rebellious beings in the abyss, chained in darkness, until the day of final judgment. The New Testament alludes to this in 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 4. God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness. The fallen spirits remained active in the world. Satan, described as the god of this world in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 verse 4, continues to wield influence, deceiving nations and tempting individuals. His goal remains the same, to oppose God and lead humanity away from him. Throughout history, humanity has seen the fingerprints of this rebellion. Idolatry, false religions, occult practices, and systems of oppression often reflect the same corrupting influence introduced by the fallen angel. Yet their power is not absolute. God's redemptive plan has continued to unfold, offering humanity a path back to him. The ultimate turning point in this story is the coming of Jesus Christ. His life, death, and resurrection broke the power of sin and death, defeating Satan's schemes. Colossians chapter 2 verse 15 declares that Christ disarmed the powers and authorities, making a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. Through Christ, humanity is no longer enslaved to the dominion of fallen powers. Believers are given authority over these forces, as Jesus declared in Luke chapter 10 verse 19. I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the power of the enemy. Today, the influence of the fallen angels can be seen in the ongoing battle between good and evil. The Apostle Paul reminds us in Ephesians chapter 6 verse 12, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. But for every scheme of the enemy, God's light shines brighter. Through faith in Christ, humanity has the power to resist these forces and live in the freedom and truth that God intended. The story of the fallen angels is one of rebellion and corruption, but it is also a story of God's relentless grace and ultimate triumph. Though they sought to dominate and rule humanity, their power is limited and their defeat is certain. The message is clear. No matter how dark the world may seem, God's love and redemption are greater. And so the question remains in this great cosmic story: which side will you choose? Will you stand in the light of Christ or be swayed by the fleeting power of rebellion? The choice is yours and the stakes are eternal. Thank you for joining this journey through time and truth. Until next time, may you walk in the wisdom and grace of God. Please remember to subscribe to this